Shalom. Our topic is when should the Megillah be read in Hadassa and Karem, and this is part two of a two-part series. Um, I want to dedicate our shoot to the memory of those that fell in Beit Shemesh today, um, which is which is beyond words. Anyways, I want to remind us of last week's shir, just in general. As we know in the Megillah, there are 2 days of reading the Megillah, Yadalit and Tetvav. Tetvav is referred to as Shushan Purim or Purim de Mukafin, Purim of the walled cities, and we discussed last week the Gemaras on the topic, how it appears in the Mishnah, how the Gemara speaks about it, and then a big machlokas Rishonim about one of the topics. One of the issues that came up in the Rishonim was based on a Gemara. The Gemara says that not only, again, the Gemara brings this in tangentially, but it becomes there's a Gemara expression gufa where it takes something that was originally brought as part of a Gemara discussion and then it puts it to the fore, discusses the issue in and of itself, the gufa davar, it discusses it directly. So the Gemara says that not only in the walled city do you read on the 15th, but that which is samuch, that which is nearby, and that which is nireh, which literally means seen with the city. So they also read on the 15th. And the Gemara learns that out according to the approach that we paskin, that you read on the 15th, that the reading on the 15th in cities that are mukafos choma mimos Yoshua binun. So the Gemara learns this out from the pasuk of Medina ve'ir va'ir. So there are not only cities, but those cities that are nearby and seen with it. So they also read on the 15th. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins as follows: B'chein kfarim hanir'im imahem, villages that are seen along with the krach, the walled city. Afilu enam smuchim, even though they're not nearby, kigon shein bahar. Let's say that they're on a mountain, and so on the one hand they're not close by, on the other hand they are seen along with it, or shesmuchim lam, they're nearby, afilu enam nirimim, even though it's not seen along with them, kigon shein ba'emek, they're in the village, they're in the valley, and so on the one hand you would see the city, you wouldn't necessarily see the nearby village, but they would read on the 15th. They'd both read on the 15th, and the Shulchan Aruch ends like the Gemara ends, ubelvad shelo yirechokim yoter mimil, as long as they're not more further away than a mil, and we'll see later on exactly what measurement that is, but it's a small relatively small measurement, meaning it's not that something that you look from afar and you see a massive area and you see a city here and you see a village along by, so that village along by, even though it might be miles away, no, it's a mil, but you read on the 15th along with it. Now, we'll remember that the Gemara said that it brought this rule that samuch afal pi she'eino nira afal pi she'eino samuch, read on the 15th. If it's seen along with the city, even though it's not nearby. If it's nearby the city, even though it's not seen along with it, it reads on the 15th. And then it said, and how much? A meal. Rashi there said, Rashi's very careful, and he said how much is considered samuch. How much is considered samuch? So the Gemara first dealt with the issue of which kinds of cities, which kinds of villages read along with the city on the 15th, and then it deals with the distance. So it didn't break, but it was really that issue that appears later on of how much a meal, that is only referring to samuch, nearby, because seen with is itself a way of gauging. Whereas samuch, nearby, you ask the question, how near, how close? And the answer is a meal. So, but the Shulchan Aruch, when it put its din in, so the Shulchan Aruch puts this meal thing after mentoring both samuch and nira. And his formulation is very very pronounced because it goes against the Rambam's formulation. Now, most of our quotes today is going to be from Rav Lau's article on this topic. Rav Yisrael Meir Lau wrote a long article in his Yachel Yisrael, which is it's a very thorough article, and it's a very thought out article, and it's also it's a very the details of this article are very carefully researched. So we'll be gaining from Rabbi Lau's presentation of the topic. So he says, according to our girsa, the Rambam shekasav tchila v'chein hakfarim anirim lahem afilu einam smuchim v'achar kach kasav oshe smuchim lahem afilu einam nirim imahem. The Rambam switches the order of the Gemara. The Rambam first talks about nira, then samuch, and then says the meal thing to make it clear that the meal distance is only referring to samuch, something that's nearby. And that makes sense. And that follows Rashi. Rashi just says the Gemara brought the whole meal issue afterwards. But the Rambam, when he's writing a code of law, wants to make sure that we don't get into that problem. And so the Rambam just switched the order of the Gemara, first presented seen along with, then he presented the issue of a close by city, and then he dealt with how close. But the Shulchan Aruch changes the formulation of the Rambam. V'nira shecholik Shulchan Aruch al Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch so much is wedded to the formulations of the Rambam that when he changes from it, it's very pronounced, and he often changes from it. But it's the same commentary, the same author of the Kesef Mishnah, who deals with this issue there. V'nira shecholik Shulchan Aruch al Rambam be'atur usvirale de l'nira ein shir ve'ashir de alpayim amma nitan rak ledin samach v'lo ledin nira. According to him, the issue of seen along with doesn't have any distance attached to it. Rather, that is the shear. When you look at the walled city and you see the villages that are seen along with it, but samuch does have a shear. Now, based on that, which is an approach to the Shulchan Aruch, which is affirmed by the Magen Avram, and the Gra, and the Pri Megadim, and the El Yerabba, and the Birkei Yosef. Not the Pri Chadash, but a long list of very prominent commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. They all affirm this is the reading of the Shulchan Aruch. Now, based on this, it would follow that if you were to, when you look at Yerushalayim and you see, again, there's certainly many vantage points where you would look at Yerushalayim and you would see Hadassa and Karem along with Yerushalayim. Again, it matters from which direction you look, but definitely it is seen along with Yerushalayim. Now, what we're going to do is look for what are reasons to say that Hadassa and Karem should read on the 15th. So one reason to say is it's nira with Yerushalayim, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins that nira is not limited by any distance, and now, what if only part of it is Nira, but not all of it. So that's Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin's approach. Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin says, Mesafkali im miktaso nira viktaso eno nira. What if only part of the city is seen along with it and not all of it? Imasai Koranis the Megillah, when do you read the Megillah? Ve'enomrim de'elu korim be'yudal ve'elu betetvav. However, you do not say that some read those who are able to see. Now, I just want to interrupt myself for a moment and mention that this topic of Nira Imo is explained in three different ways. One is an outside observer would see the walled city and the nearby village together. That's the simplest understanding of the words. A second is from the city you see the village. From the village you see the city. They see each other. And the third is that Nirimo is more of a metaphorical word. It's seen as something that is along with the city, and that fits in with the approach that we saw last time. It's considered like the city because the people they pay taxes to the city, etc. We'll see more about that later on. But if you say that it's seen from the city or it's seen from the village, the walled city is seen from the village, or from the walled city you see the village. So what if only part of them do? So he says one thing, and Rav Lau dwells on this. Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin is very clear that if some see and some don't, you don't have part of them reading on the 14th and part of them reading on the 15th. That would be a problem of the biblical prohibition, apparently the biblical prohibition of lotis kodedu, which is not to make different groups, lotasu agudos, which is not to have different groups keeping different practices within the same place. Now again, it's a very complicated topic, the prohibition of lotis kodedu, when it applies, when it doesn't apply, and if you might remember, if you have Bikias in Chappelle's Shiurim over the years, so there was a program called the Return and Learn, where alumni would come back and learn on a Friday morning at Chappelle's. So Rabbi Herschel and Rabbi Karlinsky did the topic of Lotis Godedu and presented source material on that. So that was, if you check for Lotis Godedu, and you'll find Rabbi Hirschfeld's shir on that. But the prohibition of Lotis Godedu, says Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, would apply if in the same locale you would have some people reading on the 14th and some people reading on the 15th. That's a problem of Lotis Godedu, of having prohibited factions. Umitzada Svara, says Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, Nira decoring kulam betesvav, everybody should read on the 15th. The whole city is like Dalet Amos, meaning the whole city is all one unit. Mikri Nira, therefore it's all called Nira, it's all called seen. Even though there's one place where it's not. Anybody can, there's certainly going to be places where you're not going to be able to see, let's say, the walled city from the village, or vice versa. And even if you're going to say, well, everybody can close their eyes, but so still, there are places where it's definitely not going to be even visible, even if your eyes were open. So the main thing seems to be that Elo Korcha Teyachli Sagi, as long as it's able to be seen, is enough. Huadin Khan, and that would be the same here, and therefore everybody should read as one. So two things. Number one, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin says even if some can see, that's sufficient. And number two, and if some can see, that determines that the whole unit reads on the 15th. a little more on this Lotis Goredu issue. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal, who was the Rebbe of Rabbi Lau. Rabbi Lau learned in Kol Torah, and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was the Rosh Yeshiva in Kol Torah. And he remained his Rebbe throughout his lifetime, and as chief rabbi, etc. A very, very important person in his life. So he says, Moreinu v'Rabbeinu posek ador hagon Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach zecher tzadik v'kodesh lebracha yashav rabot al meducha zo. He dealt with this issue a lot. Again, here he was talking about Ramot, either Ramot or Ramat Shlomo, I don't remember. He made a decision on this topic. Ulam nimna mehafatzas shitaso b'chashasho pen yigrmu dvarav lehader kvod shamayim. He didn't publicize his psak because he was worried that it would take away from Kvod Shamayim. It bothered him very much that the neighborhood of Ramot was split, and then there were some people that had the minhag to read it on the 14th and some on the 15th. So that bothered him very much. And then once again he says it was shoot my real diskin even in places where objectively some see and some don't. Rabbi Yishulei Diskin was worried about lotis godedu. Ureyo b'tshuvos v'anhagos alagon Rab Moshe Sternbach shlita the kiyai gavna sheyesh mishum lotis godedu eno yotzei dechovaso kriyas Megilla. Very, very strong words. That when there's a problem of losis godedu, then you don't fulfill kriyas Megillah. There's a mitzvah ba'avera. That's a very striking. I'm not sure who though would be over. Meaning, let's say you have two groups. Some are keeping the 14th. Some are keeping the 15th. So, who would be over on Lotis Godedu? All of them? The minority? That's what I'm not sure. And here he adds a very significant point. That the accusation against the generation of Purim, Haya Ribo and Machlokas Benem, was on that there was much dissent among them. V'hamana Rasha shumikoach hasamach mem kishekitre aleim amar la melech yeshno amachan mefuzar mefurad bein ha'amim b'firud levavos kasino v'machlokas v'la melech ein shaveh lahanicham tagad malcha echadhu. Hamrames li yichudo v'achduso lachdus klal Yisrael b'firudam tiporeda chavidah chavesvam chas v'shalom. Says Rav Moshe Sternbach that I think this is Rav Moshe Sternbach, unless this is Rav Lau adding this. No. He says ad kan at the end. It's Rav Sternbach adds this that. Welcome, Yona. I just want to review that we're dealing with in a neighborhood. So, Rav Yeshua Leib Diskin, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Moshe Sternbach all speak about how important it is for the people in that neighborhood to have a uniform approach to when to read on Purim. And he goes as far as saying that there's a problem of losis godedu, of prohibited factions, lotasu agudos, if there's different practices within the same neighborhood. So if you're deciding if a certain kfar, if a certain village, or in our case, a certain neighborhood of Jerusalem is considered part of Yerushalayim and reads on the 15th, or not and reads on the 14th, so there should be uniform practice. Otherwise, says Rav Sternbach, there's a problem of losis godedu, there's a problem of prohibited factions, but then, says Rav Sternbach, it would be a mitzvah ba'avera. It would be ironically the mitzvah being an avera, which is striking. And parenthetically, he mentions, and it seems like it's Rav Sternbach mentions that in that generation, that was one of the accusations that was able to be leveled against Am Yisrael in Haman's voice. Yeshno am echad mefuzar umeforad bein ha'amim, that they're not just scattered, that they're in different places, but they're also factioned. They're split. They're full of dissent and machlokes. They're not unified. So that itself was uh, was an accusation against Klal Yisrael. V'lo shaveh lamelech lanicham, and it's not worthwhile for the melech. Melech is one who unites the whole kingdom, and so it's not worth it for him to leave them because they are against the unity of that is a very strong and important aspect of the melech. So um, that's the second, I guess, reason to read on the 15th. At least part of it, is able to be seen along with Yerushalayim, and as Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Yeshua Leib Diskin, and Rav Moshe Sternbach all caution, we should make sure to avoid lo tiskodedu in the issue of Purim, and therefore, that was one of the things that pained Rav Rav Shlomo Zalman so much, that in Ramot there were divergent practices. Okay. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's approach. This is a third reason to read, or a third, I would say, a third layer of the psak to read on the 15th in Hadassa and Karem. Shlomo Zalman said like this: L'shitato, shenemar rabot l'sho'alav l'voi beito. He would say this a lot to the people who would ask him, or the people who were in his household. Av shchuna hamarucheket yoter mishir mil. Even a neighborhood which is more than a meal's distance, and let's say it's not visible. Yesh laduna kedina krach, it should be judged like the krach, like the walled city, in our case Jerusalem. If it is joined along in the Eruv with the neighborhoods that are close to the wall. V'gam nitzeit tachat shilton mikomi echad, and it's all part of one municipality. Kedivrei Aran. Now this very, very much follows the approach of the Ran. Shetzrich lishtatef imakrach be'inyanem. So he mentions that that kfar, which is joined up to the city, is a partner with the city in all of its matters. And things like, where do you pay taxes to? How are you defined as part of the same city? And he developed that very in detail above when he quoted those three shitos in the Rishonim. Just like with regards to Eruvin, the neighborhood is all like considered one unit, $1 amos with the city. Even though there is an area within that which isn't settled. It's the same thing applies to Purim and Kriyas Megillah b'Yeshli Krobas Megillah b'Yom Tedvav, and you should read on the 15th. Now, one of the touchy issues methodologically with halacha is, when do halachic categories and halachic parameters that apply to one area of halacha apply to another one? So, for instance, we know that the halachic gedarim of a walled city, of an Ir Mukefes Choma, for the laws of Ir Mukefes Choma, for, let's say, Tumah V'Tara, for that which certain should stay out of the walls. One of the walls of the walled city, the one of the levels of kedusha of Eretz Yisrael are walled cities. where, if I'm remembering correctly, the Metzoros is out of. But the definition of a walled city, as the Gemara is very clear in the first parak of Megillah, is not identical to that of Purim. This whole Samach Vanira thing is a Purim thing, and the commentaries bring, because the issue of Mukefes Choma is really more not being an Ir Prazi. And as we mentioned before, one of the reasons for saying that these other cities are considered part of the walled city is because they were specially protected in wartime by being able to be part of the walled city. So, so you can't always borrow from one halachic category to another. But Rav Shlomo Zalman felt it was legitimate, according to the Ran, who holds that that's exactly what this din of niremo means. This samach v'nira is this niremo is something that is part of the city, and they are joined up with the city for all of their matters. So a neighborhood that pays taxes to the Jerusalem municipality, and the neighborhood that is included in the Jerusalem Eruv, so they're part of the city. So that's not an if you will, an illegal borrowing from the realm of Eruv into the realm of Purim. Yitzuyan sheyesh achokim al shitazo. It should be noted that there are those who argue on this. So the shitatam, ein lismoch al Eruv ve'ir le'ni kriyas Megilla. You can't rely on the Eruv for kriyas Megilla. V'tama mani mokam mamo. And you can look in Minchas Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss. I'm blanking out the who is the not Rav Rosner. That's the Shevet Alevi. But I'm almost sure it's Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss and Minchas Yitzchak, and who was the Dayan of the Erech HaRedis. Tzitza Kodesh, I don't remember who that is, though I checked it up once, and Ira Kodesh VaMikdash, which is the sefer on everything and anything having to do with Yerushalayim by the great Rav Yechiel Michal Tukansinski who was an Ish Yerushalayim, well known for his halachic calendar. So he also holds this. So you should know this is an issue that Rav Shlomo Zalman took a position on, but it was not without dissent. And he goes on to say that, wait a second, you're going to tell me if you can somehow join everybody together in one Eruv, so all of Eretz Yisrael is going to be all one walled city. So that's one of the arguments on that topic. Now, I just want to share that there is a report that when Rav Shlomo Zalman himself was in Hadassa and Karem for Purim, that he was machmer to read on both the 14th and the 15th. But I don't personally machmer, but I don't, I don't remember the source where I saw that. So my in terms of his personal practice, but that was what he told people to read on the 15th there. Now, I'd like to present Rav Lau's final conclusions about Ein Karem and Hadassa Ein Karem, and I just want to call attention to his precision and research. Okay. The neighbor of Ein Karem and Beit HaCholim Hadassa. Hachel michomot ha'ir atika derech shchonot Mea Sharim, Geula, Mekor Baruch, Sari Yisrael, Rehov Yafo, Shderot Herzl, Malonot Sham, the hotels on Herzl, Beit HaKarem, Shari Tzedek, Bayit Vegan, Kiryat Yovel, Kiryat Menachem, Vekala Betzomet Hamovil Moshav Ora. If you go from the old city, you will note that there is continuous settlement, continuous Shetach Banui. There's the area of all of those areas is continuous all the way to Moshav Ora, which is if you remember those who are not right now in Eretz Yisrael, but if you remember being at a wedding in Moshav Ora, so there's an intersection at the bottom of the hill, and you have to go up to get to Moshav Ora. So from the old city to there, Ein Hefsek Shel Kuf Mem Aleph Amma Bein Abatim. That's one of the ways of judging what is the halachic parameters of continuous settlement. There's not 141 amas between the houses. לפיכך נידונים כולם כחטיבה אחת בעיר ירושלים תיקוני ותיפונן לקריאת המגילה ביום ט' מדין סמוך במציאות. They are actually סמוך. They're nearby. You simply you see continuous settlement from there. מהצומת של מושב אורה ועד בית חולים הדסה. How about that area? So המרחק בקו אווירי מידתו כ-400 עד 500 מטר. So there's about 400 to 500 meters, half a kilometer, as the crow flies. ובמדידה רגילה על פי הקרקע, but if you measure it on the ground, it's 800 meters. Whereas, I missed something here. I missed a line. But a meal is there's a line missing from the original. A meal is 1,152 according to the Chazon Ish, and 960 meters according to the Rav Avram Chaim Noah. So the distance from Ora to Hadassa is less than a mil. Certainly, if you go by Kav Aviri, as the crow flies, and even on the ground. B'tzido she'nei shel hakvish, on the other side of the road, הממשיך את שדרות הרצל, בפנייה לרחוב עין כרם, ישנה שכונה שהמרחק מהבית האחרון שבשכונה זו ועד הבית הראשון של שכונת עין כרם הערבית אינו עולה עד 350 מטר, לפיכך דינא כדין ירושלים תיקונן ותיקונן לעניין קריאת המגילה. So the other side of the road, that's on one side of the road, the other side of the road, so it's even less. גם בית החולים הדסה נכלל בעירוב המרכזי. Hadassa, that's the neighborhood of Ein Karem. The hospital of Ein Karem, Hadassa Ein Karem, is included in the Eruv. B'arei k'bedocha daled alamot shel ha'ir Yerushalayim v'tikvanim af l'inyan Purim kamavur b'shitas Moreinu v'Rabbeinu Hagorno Shlomo Zalman Auerbach zecher tzaddik v'kodesh l'bracha le'el b'nidon shchunat Ramat Shlomo ot Gimel. So what Rav Shlomo Zalman holds about Ramat Shlomo, so he held about Hadassa Ein Karem also. Now here you can see, if you're looking on the in the zoom, so the edge of Moshav Ora is right over here. If you see where my cursor is moving, and here's Hadassa, and here's that area that he measured before. So you can see that there's an open area before, and I just want to point out something that might have been deceptive about the original photo that I put on this slides presentation. This photo is taken not from the direction of Jerusalem, but from the other direction. So this is, as you're approaching Jerusalem from the west, this is what you would see. This is the Ein Karem seen from the west, and I assume it's near sundown, and that's the light on the Hadassa hospital there. And here's the map of the Eruv. Hadassa's over here. For your reference, Beit Karem is right over here. The old city's here, and here's Ramot, and Ramat Shlomo is also inside the Eruv of Yerushalayim. Here's a close-up of Hadassa and Karem. And so you can see that it's all included in the Eruv of Jerusalem. Finally, Rav Shlomo Zalman's conclusions lahalacha. Ad kan hochachnu shel shchunat Ramat Shlomo v'Ramot yesh din nira l'rov Rishonim v'Achronim. According to most Rishonim and Achronim, it has it's in the category of nira. Seen ve'aftin samuch, nearby. Lefi rov chachmei Yerushalayim b'dor kodem, according to most chachmei Yerushalayim of the previous generation, which is one of the things that you enumerated earlier. Me'ata yesh lomar la'alacha. We can therefore say sheshchunat Ramot akolel that kol shchunot shenivnu Ramot kolel Ramot sheish hanivneit ata, which I'm not sure what that is, and this is quite a while ago. This article was written. B'shchunat Ramat Shlomo. Mitzdarfot lekerach Yerushalayim b'dinan lekayim b'yom tetvav be'adar et kol mitzvot yom ha'pripurim. He comes out conclusively that Ramot and Ramat Shlomo should be reading on the 15th. Kamokein kol batim she'atidin libanot b'shchonot ela, the buildings that will be built in these neighborhoods be'ofen shelo yeh merchak shel yoter מ-67.6 meter מהבניין האחרון עד לבניין החדש שייבנה, as long as there's not that amount of distance between the previous settlement and the new building. וכן אם יבנו בתים בסמוך לכביש 4 בשטח שבין שכונת אונסדורף לשכונת רמות ארזים, כל אלה נחשבים סמוכים ונראים לכרך ירושלים. All those areas are considered סמוך ונראה to ירושלים, ודין ככרך לכל מצוות יום הפורים. Kmokein Shchunat, here's his conclusions. Ein Karem, Uvichlala Beit HaCholim Hadassa al Pia Eruv. Again, following Rav Shlomo Zalman's approach. So I think he's that Hadassa, his measurement. I think I have to correct what I said before. His measurement from Moshav Ora is to the neighborhood of Ein Karem, but not to the hospital of Hadassa Ein Karem. So that has the din of samach according to most approaches. Nira yesh lefakvek lekama shitot, even though you might say it's not nira. Mikomakom la'alacha afi mitzdarf lekrach Yerushalayim chol dina. Nevertheless, it should be added to Yerushalayim for all of its laws. And he adds at the end, it should be noted that any new building or any new neighborhoods near Yerushalayim would have to be evaluated anew. B'chol makom shel safek yaseh shelat ravav k'mi shemash yifseku lo kein yinhag, and you should ask a shaila and do whatever he paskin. So that's the discussion about Hadassa and Karem, and Lamaisa, his approach that Hadassa and Karem should read on the 15th, and it sounds like heavily influenced by Rav Shlomo Zalman's approach that anything that's within the Eruv, based on the Ran and the Meiri and the Ritva, is considered part of Yerushalayim. L'chol inyaneha.